In this video, I'm going to break down the top 3 things you should consider when deciding what distribution route you're going to take. And towards the end, I'm going to straight out name who I think is the best overall distributor for independent films budgeted under $100,000. And the runner-up. I'm Jay Horton. I make movies that make money. This is how. Independent film distribution can be a minefield, filled with predatory distributors, filmmakers and distributors adhering to outdated modes of thought and strategy, and an oversaturated market, which has brought about a general devaluing of films in the marketplace. These and many other factors make the search for the right distribution and distribution strategy even more crucial today than it was in the past. Things you should consider when deciding on a distributor. Number 3, know the market and where to start looking. One thing that really kind of irritates most distributors is having their time wasted with inappropriate submissions. So when you're doing your initial research, make sure that the distributors you're planning to reach out to and contact even deals with movies like yours. And I'm not just talking about just genre either. Budget level matters too. Most distributors tend to work within a few specific genres or budget levels or both. So it's really important to match your project to distributors that are of the same ilk as your movie. Don't submit a romantic comedy to a horror distributor or vice versa. Or if you have a $50,000 budgeted movie, look for distributors that work within that budget range. Now, there is something to be said for trying to go bigger than what your budget is and your distribution aims, but just know what you're getting into. Just because a larger distributor may take your film, that doesn't necessarily mean that you should take that deal. Wait, what? Why the fuck not? I know this is a little hard to hear, but at the end of the day, regardless of who the distributor is, there is a cap on what most smaller independent films are going to make in the marketplace. Of course, there are outliers that go far beyond that cap, but in general, most don't. And taking a deal with a larger distributor, it comes with strings. Longer term lengths, more costs are involved, sales fees, higher revenue splits. And in many cases, those increased fees will not be greater than the extra reach that distributor might provide you. And notice I said might. So let's do a little hypothetical. Say you have a film with a $45,000 budget, let's say a horror film, and it turned out pretty damn good, but you have no real big name talent, and while the movie is good, it's most likely not going to be the next breakout Blair Witch, or insert hipper, newer film here. But you think there's a chance, so you go with the larger distributor. And I'm just going to make up some general numbers here, but these are in the realm of what is average. Let's say they charge you $25,000 in sales fees, and then they take a 35% cut of the back end. And then they land you a small cable deal, or say a Netflix or Hulu deal. Let's be clear here. Getting one of these bigger deal type deals has way more to do with the movie itself than who's distributing it. But I digress. So for that deal type deal, let's say you get something like $15,000 for a 30 or 60-day exclusive. And then they widen out onto the typical streaming platforms. So going into the regular streaming rotation, you're still at least $10,000 in the red, not to mention the higher back end that they're taking. And to be honest, in today's streaming market, especially when it comes to smaller films, most distributors have almost the exact same reach regardless of their size when it comes to streaming. Now sure, maybe you do end up with a slightly larger cable or a streaming deal and get it up front, and it might even cover most or all of those sales fees, but they're still taking that bigger chunk of the back end, and over the lifetime of your film, it's going to earn you less money. A movie release is a lifetime endeavor, not just its initial year. And again, I am talking in extreme generalities here. There are for sure examples where people went with that bigger distributor and it worked out fantastic for them, and they're so glad they did it. But I would most likely argue that success had more to do with the movie itself than the distributor. Number 2, know your optimal intent. Number two, know your in. Number two, know the optimal release strategy for your movie. Wait, isn't that the distributor's job? Well, yeah, it is. But if you as a filmmaker have absolutely no clue what your best options are as far as where your movie is going to be exhibited and where it will do the best, how can you have any real idea of whether or not a certain distributor is right for you or not? This is a tough one, and one that filmmakers with less experience in distribution are going to have trouble with. But it's important, if you're going to be in this game, to start to understand these things. The problem many new and honestly even most experienced filmmakers get into is they leave this shit up to the distributor to figure out. They find somebody they like, maybe somebody with a good overall reputation, and they leave it to them. What if this distributor's values and strategies don't align with your particular film? A lot of larger distributors, and some smaller ones too, they pick up smaller films to basically stuff their catalogs. When you're choosing a distributor, it's really important that you have a grasp on what is the best release strategy for your film. To my way of thinking, this is really the only way to choose a distributor. And really, this kind of introspection can be tough. And it requires that filmmakers take a hard, objective look at their film and decide where it best fits in the distribution landscape. Is it a wide theatrical level release? For most of us, that answer is usually no. What about limited theatrical release? There's some value there, but again, for most of us, the answer is maybe. But again, most films that do this successfully, the limited theatrical, are in the higher stratosphere of low budget projects. We're talking, at least $500,000 to a few million and above, and usually with higher level name talent. Now, of course, there are outliers, and maybe your film is just that good. Anyway, the point is, if your film fits into either of those categories, you want to work with a distributor that does that. Then there's forewalling, where you pay to have your film put into a theater for an amount of time. And sometimes that can add some legitimacy to a smaller movie, just to put it in a theater in Los Angeles or New York for a, 5-7 day run. I did this on Death Day, and well, honestly, that one didn't work out so hot with that particular strategy, but it doesn't invalidate the strategy. We basically played in a week in LA, and it cost us about $5,000. We pretty much broke even on the ticket sales, but the run did get us reviews in Variety and Hollywood Reporter, which in some cases can act as a boost to the film's streaming run, where it'll make its real money. And there are distributors that specialize in this. But often the costs for the forewalling do come out of the filmmaker's end, or they pay up front for it. And then there's physical media. Now, physical media might be dwindling, but it is still a thing, especially in horror. Does your film have a good, strong demand for physical media? You may want to look at distributors that do that. But again, just like when we were talking about those, cable deals or, big streaming deals earlier, is the bump in sales that you'll get for the physical media equal to or greater than the fees that it's going to cost you? Now, you don't always have to know the exact answers to these questions, but the distributor you're talking to should. And if they can't or won't answer those questions, then they're probably not the right fit. Another thing to consider is, how is that particular distributor handling windowing? Does it align with the best strategy for your individual film? There are some films that a good windowing strategy is crucial. There's others, well, not so much. So how do you navigate all this? I'll give a quick personal example. I have a lower budgeted horror movie called Craving, budgeted a bit under $100,000. Now, for this movie, there really isn't much of a chance of a wide theatrical release, almost a 0%. And its limited theatrical potential is, well, limited. And this isn't to say that it's not a very good movie or it's not good enough to get those things. It's just a movie at this budget level with the elements that are in the movie doesn't really stand much of a chance in doing a limited theatrical, or at least one that would be financially viable. So distributors that specialize or offer theatrical runs in the US aren't really of much interest to me when it comes to this movie. Now, that said, I suppose there could be some benefit in trying the four-wall thing again, and that's something that I might consider. But the most optimal initial release destination for the US anyway would be a premium streaming deal. And in my estimation, this being a horror movie and a monster movie, would most likely be through Shudder. Quick aside. Now, at the same time that we're pursuing this premium streaming deal or deals, we're also at the same time seeking out foreign sales as well. Movies like Craving tend to do very well overseas, especially in, say, Germany or Japan. But back to the US. After the premium release, if we do land one, Craving will most likely make most of its first year money through streaming on TVOD, transactional video on demand. I know. I've spoken shit about TVOD a lot in past videos, but this is one of those projects that I think will do very well in TVOD, especially on Amazon. After that, I think the movie will see most of its money through regular AVOD and SVOD, say Tubi AVOD, Amazon SVOD, stuff like that. Followed up a year or two later with YouTube MCNs. While we're doing the TVOD and streaming thing, I think we'll also try to pursue some physical sales as well. But it's not nearly as high up on my priority list as the other stuff is for this particular project. In my educated opinion, I think that this is the optimal path for distribution for this movie. And if for whatever reason it doesn't get that premium deal, then so be it. We just move on to the TVOD. So what kind of distributor am I looking for? I'm looking for a distributor that has a connect with one of those premium streaming channels. I'm looking for a distributor that possibly has some experience four-walling films. I'm looking for a distributor that hits the major streaming platforms that this film will thrive on. Hello, Amazon and Tubi. And spoiler alert, every single distributor in existence has a connection with Tubi and Amazon, pretty much. I'm also looking for a distributor that has a track record selling foreign. And finally, a distributor that embraces the YouTube MCNs, as I believe in the long term, they're going to make quite a bit of money there. And that brings me to the last and honestly the most important thing you should consider when deciding on a distributor. Trustworthiness. Or if they're new to you, good, vetted word of mouth from trusted industry professionals. At the end of the day, there are several distributors that meet most or all of the criteria that I've mentioned here. But there are only a handful, honestly less, that I truly trust, that I know will give me a good deal and will honor that commitment. While there are other distributors out there with good reputations and that I've heard great things about, there are only two that I've worked with, and I've worked with many, that I would seriously consider distributing through again. And that brings me to the two best distribution outlets, in my opinion, for films under $100,000. And those are Indie Rights and FilmHUB. Well, FilmHUB isn't exactly a distributor, but I've done videos about that. You can check that out. I know. There are filmmakers out there that will adamantly disagree with me here. Hell, I've worked with and continue to work with producers that don't 100% share my feelings here. But for me, in my opinion, I think that most movies under $100,000 with no major stars, these are the way to go. So, like it, lump it, this is my truth. From my experience in distribution with over 60 films in the market. Others' experiences will vary, but Indie Rights and FilmHUB, they are transparent, they are honest. Whatever your movie makes, you will get your piece, and to me, that says a ton. There are no sales fees tacked on, and both continue to grow and add new platforms on a regular basis. Indie Rights in particular has grown a lot in their foreign sales in the last couple of years, and they're signing deals with larger premium streaming outlets. The only potential downside is within physical media. FilmHUB, there's absolutely no physical media, and with Indie Rights, as far as I know, it's pretty much on demand. But I feel like the upside to a distributor with better physical distribution is not worth the sales fees and the other strings that come into play. At least not in any of the films that I've made. But all of that said, this is all from my perspective. This is what has worked and or is right for my films, and it might not be right for yours. Every film has its own path, so do your research, find yours. But whatever you do, keep making movies.